What's going on, guys? In today's video, I'm going to go over CPI that was just released, and we're also going to talk about the Fed meeting that's going on today and tomorrow. We're going to get our rate decision tomorrow, and the market's expecting another pause. The market's also expecting rate cuts before the summer. And I'm also going to touch on Bitcoin. It did just recently touch 40,000. And first off, CPI. Now, I'll give you guys a link down below going over all the minute details, but the big picture here is we came in pretty much in line with expectations. We are now at a 3.1% year over year. Now, in my previous video, I mentioned that if we get into the twos, the market would rally on that, and we didn't get into the twos. It does look like small caps are having a little bit of pain today, but overall it is good to see inflation continuing to trend down. Next reading, I expect us to break our lowest reading that we received, which was a 3%, and this was back in summer before we started ticking back up to 3.7 to then finally start coming down over the last few months. So I am anticipating next CPI we will be into the twos, which would indicate that inflation is still cooling and the Fed can start lowering rates like what's expected towards the summer, if not late spring. And the Fed meeting is going on today into tomorrow as of this upload, and we will get the Fed rate decision on December 13th, Wednesday. I'm expecting yet another pause, as is the overall market, and what the Fed says is really going to be what's key, not necessarily what they're doing, because what they're doing is already pretty much expected. It isn't like it was months ago when the market was fighting over, are we going to get a 0.25% raise or a 0.50 raise? What the market's really looking at is when can the Fed start cutting rates. And when CPI gets more into the twos and core gets down towards the low threes, there will be a lot more talk about Fed rate cuts. But definitely look out for the 13th. That's when they're going to make their decision. And we also have over 500 million in liquidations from Bitcoin's recent drop. In the last 24 hours, with Bitcoin's pullback from the low 40s down to basically 40, we saw about 500 million in liquidations. And despite pulling back, shorts still saw $70 million in liquidations, while longs are in the $435 million range of liquidations. And playing with leverage is definitely very risky, and I really don't recommend it unless you know what you're getting into. Some people get impatient and they want to throw a bunch of extra multiples on top of their trade, and that's not always the way to go. And even look at these shorts. There are still short liquidations despite Bitcoin's drop in price. And even if Bitcoin is going in the direction that you leveraged for, there's still a chance you get liquidated on a huge downwards wick that just comes right back up, and it's very risky to play with leverage. Most people get burnt. That said, if you know what you're getting into, if you know what you're risking, if you understand the risks, I guess it's alright to play with leverage, just knowing that you could lose it all. Now, looking at Bitcoin, the RSI has certainly cooled off in the last couple of days, which is fantastic. And one thing I'm watching for is this green line here, this ascending trend line. If we do break it, I think the market will react to it. So I think it is worth keeping an eye on this trend line here. And you'll notice that Bitcoin went all the way to 40,000 before it was quickly met with buyers. I do think the psychological 40,000 will be a very important level to keep an eye on. And right now we're trading right around 41,000, which will be an important level of support. If we break this, we're probably going back to 40. And if we break 40,000, there's a chance we witness an even further drop down towards the 38s, which was a previous pretty strong resistance. And you'll notice on our way down back in May, April of 2022, there was an attempt to hold up this 38,000, but it was failed. So if we do get there, it's important to watch 38,000 as well. It has been a pretty important level in the past. But Bitcoin's still doing wonderful, and despite potentially getting to the high 30s, I think now is a great time to add to Bitcoin. And sure, sometimes it's nice to be patient and anticipate some lower prices, but at the same time, if you believe in Bitcoin long term, if you know what's coming in 2024 and 2025, I think worrying about say 35,000 versus buying at 38,000 is somewhat insignificant when looking at the big picture. And I do think moving forwards, pullbacks will be less severe, while run-ups will get us to all-time new highs. So far, we've been creating yearly highs, and it will be a while till we get to the 60,000s, till we get to new all-time highs for Bitcoin. But once we do that, once we break out past 70,000, I do believe we'll see some massive moves coming. And that's when the FOMO really starts to kick in. And while this drop seems worrisome, while there's people that probably bought towards the top at 44, 45,000, and they're probably regretting it, keep in mind that, in the beginning of December, we were right around $40,000, if not even a little bit lower, actually. You'll see on the 1st of December, we were in the 38s. And sometimes, you just have to zoom out, be patient. Bitcoin has been doing wonderfully throughout all of 2023. And in the beginning of the year, we were only at $16,000. And the fact that we have tripled in this year, despite what in my opinion is still somewhat negative sentiment at times, to me speaks volumes. I believe there's a lot of people out there that don't realize how much Bitcoin has gained so far. And there's a lot of people on the sidelines waiting to see Bitcoin break new highs, and a lot of people waiting to get closer to the Bitcoin halving. But when you look back, to me it's obvious that we're never going to see the 15,000s again. Probably never in Bitcoin's future. And people that took advantage of the pullbacks came out on top. And I do think this will be another instance of that. As I've said previously, any dip for Bitcoin is a buying opportunity, and I believe it will be throughout 2024, maybe even into early 2025, before it's time to start considering taking some profits. I also want to quickly touch on Iris Energy. It does look like it's going to break its trend line once more. And despite us recently pulling back, the EMAs are starting to flip. Remember, they're lagging indicators, but if we do continue to pull back, we might find resistance on the 50 and 200 EMA flip. So far, the 50 has flipped back over the 100. And there's always that possibility that Bitcoin sees a nice pump in the next couple of days once we get out of the Fed meeting. And maybe Iris Energy witnesses a bounce right at $5 and gets back towards the mid fives, at which case we may see these EMAs cross, which would be very bullish. And as for the moving averages, we are still waiting for the cross there. They are still a ways apart because of our recent long downtrend we witnessed from the end of summer pretty much to the end of October. But if we don't fall much further from here and we start gaining momentum, pushing to new highs, breaking out of the low sixes, we will eventually see the 50 and 200 MA cross, which would bring more bullish momentum. But let me know what you think about CPI that just released. What do you think the Fed's going to do? It is anticipated we're going to see another pause. And also, how do you feel about Bitcoin? Are you taking advantage of it now while it's at 40,000? Or are you being patient and trying to wait for the high 30s? Or do you simply just DCA and not even worry about price? Also, what miners are you loading up on? I'm currently watching for CleanSpark to fill its gap in the 7s. And I'm also keeping a close eye on Iris if we do pull back anymore, especially if we get closer to the 50 and 200 MA into the 4s. I will be adding some Iris to my position. And I am still considering another Bitcoin miner, so let me know what you guys think. What should I get into next? Let me know down below. Thanks as always, guys, and I'll catch you next time.